Just Sensational is an exhibition that looks at the histories of lesbian and gay queer people's lives in Western Sydney, starting at colonial time up to present. So it's a mix of historical stories, sensationalist headlines in the newspapers, and more contemporary issues that face lesbian and gay people living in Western Sydney today. Start as early as the first colonisation of Liverpool with Bass and Flinders. So there's always this doubt about Flinders' sexuality, although some people say Flinders, the love letters that he wrote Bass were similar to love letters or letters that other men wrote to each other in those times. But we just want to we want to expose the way that men have related to each other in the past that may or may not have been sexual, and just put a bit of a question mark around that, talking about the homosocial evolution of the way that men related to each other in Western Sydney. More recent histories are the Olympics. The Olympics is a wonderful story, a narrative that flows through this whole exhibition, because this exhibition is part of the Gay Games as well that's coming to Sydney. And the Olympics were a social club that had athletics out here in Western Sydney starting in 1974, and the Pollies, which was a social club, organised these events, and Miss Grease, G-R-E-A-S-E, not Miss Grease from Athens, used to fall out the back of a car and run towards the cauldron, recite the Greek weather from the night before, and light the flame to inaugurate the Olympics. So we have a wonderful tradition here in Western Sydney of celebrating our own spaces and our own achievements.
One of the most interesting people to me in this exhibition is Harry Payne, and I had the privilege of doing a lot of research about Harry's life. Harry's early life is shrouded in a lot of mystery. All we know is that Harry was born a biological female called Annie Payne. Annie arrived with her parents in Sydney when she was about 13, and quite soon after she started to cross-dress, to call herself a boy, and make clear her intentions to want to live as a man. There are only very sketchy details around Harry's life until the age of 64. We know now that he married twice, he was widowed twice, he was an active member of the Salvation Army, in fact he was known as Brother Payne, and that he had a long career on the New South Wales Government Railways as a man. Quite sadly, after Harry's second wife died, he seemed to suffer what we would now call probably a nervous breakdown. He was getting older, he was 64. He was in quite reduced financial circumstances and had been forced to rent out his house and occupy just the front bedroom of what had been his marital home with his second wife. He collapsed in the street, quite distressed, was taken by the police to the Lidcombe men's home. There they did a normal entry and normal admission procedure. This included stripping someone down, washing them and putting them in a hospital gown. When they did this, the attendants found, to their surprise, that Harry Payne was in fact a biological woman. They called the police, not sure what to do. Psychiatrists were brought in. Harry was interviewed. Harry continued to maintain that he was a man, he was not a woman. He would not be wearing women's clothes. He would not be convinced at all that he was a biological female. Given this, he was declared insane. Because he was declared insane and was quite alone in the world, he had no one to advocate for him, he was incarcerated. He was then transported to the Orange Mental Asylum. The year was 1939. The war had just started. Conditions at the Orange Mental Asylum were bad. There had been government reports into the asylum. It was regarded as overcrowded, conditions were very poor, patients were frequently tied to chairs or tied to their beds or otherwise immobilised. Harry was forced to wear female clothes, was forced to answer to the name Annie. He lived for 1 year. He died 12 months later in Orange Mental Asylum. He's buried in an unmarked grave in Orange Cemetery, and most sadly buried under the name Annie Payne, which he was
is I looked out the window, it was raining, I was crying, and I said, I don't want to get married. I do not want to get married. And my mum was saying, you have to. Everything's planned. I'm saying, oh, I don't want to get married, I don't want to get married. Anyway, so...
Why didn't you want to get married?
Because I had been in love prior to this with a woman. So, but I left him in the January. In the February, I would have been, on the 19th, would have been married for 25 years. I know in that whole 25 years, I never ever had an orgasm in 25 years. So, yeah, who I related to so well, who cross-dressed, went until I think I was about 21 or 22 years of age when I found out, and I thought, oh my goodness, no wonder, you know. But then I was married then, and having my first child, but still, even though that I was married, I still knew that I didn't want to be in this married relationship, but still that thing kept coming back. I used to live in Macquarie Fields at the time, and the phone rang, and I picked it up and it was her. And you know what, previously, for months I had been dreaming about her, and it just come on just like that. And I thought to myself, and I dropped the phone, I said, oh, shit, she's come for me, she's coming for me. It was funny.
Where was she ringing from?
She was ringing from Melbourne. She'd come from Lebanon.
Right.
She was coming here for a holiday.
Right.
Okay. Anyway, so, but I thought she was coming here because she knew she's found out she's gay, and she's coming back for me. Catholic system, my schooling, this other woman saying it's the wrong thing to do, and me being at a very young age at 14 and not knowing the feelings I was feeling, even though I used to never wanted to be with.
Diaries, because you told me you've been keeping them for a while. How long have you been writing your diaries for?
Well, I started, I wish I could remember for sure, but I think I've got about a dozen of these tiny little diaries about this big. They were those little diaries, one page per day.
Yep.
And I wrote as much as I could into that one page. If I used to watch a lot of movies as well, so I'd record all the movies I saw as well, and with little tiny mini reviews of what I thought of them as like, because I was a real a bit of a buff on movies. But yeah, the only problem with these diaries is that I can't always figure out what it is that was going on because of the code I used to use. Because I didn't want my sister finding the diaries and figuring out what the hell's going on. Because there was a lot of at the time I was having affairs with married men. I was about 17, 18 years old, and my first major relationships were with married men who were living out in Blacktown, had 2 or 3 kids, were totally in the closet.
Like, if you can imagine that the diaries could speak, like, what would they say about your time growing up as a young gay man in Blacktown? Like, how would they describe it?
I think back on that, it was like I was in a prison.
Well,
yeah, and that's probably why I kept it, because there was not much else to do. There was no gay scene for me. I didn't discover Oxford Street and all that until, much later in life. I know we're using that story of mine, The Long and the Winding Road, but I suppose it is a really apt, title for me, because, and I suppose for a lot of other guys as well, to get to 50, which I am this year, which I never thought I'd ever become. Woo.
romantic affair as well as a sexual affair?
Oh yeah, it was like real love. Yeah, I was totally in love with this guy. And you know, I'd go round to his place, I think on a weekly basis at least, you know, to actually have to do this lesson thing, and then we'd sit back and listen to music, which is one of my greatest pleasures with him. We just listened to all sorts of music. You know, he liked classical music, but I was into pop and rock and stuff like that. So, but unfortunately, one day, you know, his wife sort of, I think, she used to go to bed early and leave us till it, not knowing. Well, I assume she didn't know what was going on. She just assumed that he was in there with his friend listening to records. It was his time. I think he was allowed to do that once a week. But she eventually one day came out of bed and came into the room and found us in a state of embrace. Nothing too, whoops indeed. You know, he got up, went out to talk to her. About half an hour later, he comes back in and says, "Con, I'm sorry, it's all over. You've got to go." It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and I find myself out in the streets, and bawling my eyes out. 2 o'clock in the morning in Blacktown is a really weird time. There's no one else about.
Okay, and so there's one other question after the one last question. Is like you're also from a Greek background and living in Blacktown and a young gay man. What was that like?
Well, I guess I'm probably luckier than a lot of Greek men. I possibly have heard stories about when my dad died when I was 15, so I never had to deal with my father finding out I was gay. My sister discovered I was gay pretty early in life, and she was quite cool about that. She was younger than me, and I told my mother, I think when I was about 15 or 16, when I came home one day in a state of tears over some guy I'd been seeing, you know, and I was probably a bit older than that, 17, 18, not too sure now, and I remember she asked me, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "No, it's nothing, it's about a woman, is it?" I said, "No, it's about a guy." And I said, "Yeah, it's about him, is it?" And yeah. She burst into tears. The tears lasted for about 4 minutes. I made some kind of crack. She just burst out laughing, and that was it. The one thing I've learned in life is to not underestimate your mother. At least I don't know about dads.
We took our children to physical culture, and we met there.
We were friends for 4 or 5 years.
And then it turned into more of a best friend thing the last few years before that, and then we went further in the last 3. The current relationship, that I wouldn't classify it as a relationship. It was only purely a parental relationship because of the children, but our actual relationship with each other was well and truly over and had been for quite some time. In regards to the way it happened, and it was quite traumatic for everybody at that time, but our relationship in itself, the way we felt, was probably the most wonderful thing that we'd ever felt.
It was hard.
Very hard.
They had a lot of outside influences, very negative influences. All we could do was do the best that we knew possible. Went through counselling, showed them support. We still have conflict every now and then. The oldest really enjoys sitting at school and listening to all the girls talk about, "Oh, what would it be like being a lesbian? Yuck." And then they turn around and say, "Well, my mother is," and watch their reactions. They really enjoy that
They
sort
like
of thing.
the reaction part of it now. They think it's quite funny.
And then all their friends turn around and say, "Oh, that's so cool. I wish my mum was gay." But it's still hard. It's still hard on them. You still get the negative reactions.
I think that there's a lot of positive influences in their lives as well. That, I mean, once they realised that nobody was going to hold it against them because we were gay, and that we had friends and relatives that did accept them and did accept us the way we were, and they were treated no differently once they started to realise that. And it did take a lot of convincing. We're not openly gay. What we very rarely wouldn't walk down the street arm in arm or hand in hand.
Yeah, we do in the inner city.
Yet we go into town, we will. We don't have an issue with it. I think it's a protective thing, not for us. We don't care. But we have 4 children that we have to care about. There's eyes out there. There's people that see you. So, for their sake, we're quite sedate out here. Although we have, since we've moved out here, the last 3 years, we've noticed an increase in gay people out here, just noticeably.
Well, yeah, we don't know whether it's an increase or whether
we just
notice it more.
You know, in our neighbourhood, there's other families just like us, and I'm sure there is in other areas, but we're not too sure whether they're here, and we can't openly advertise the fact that we'd like to get to know people, you know.
They're probably being just as cautious as what we are.
Like any other family, you know, life revolves around those kids, and they we're out to do what we can for them and give them the best part of life that we can, and we'll take it from there.
I'm writing a play at the moment, which I'm hoping to have produced next year, called Love Your Gran, and it's examining the relationship between a grandmother and her gay grandson. I find that the relationship between grandkids and grandparents really isn't addressed. There doesn't seem to be much research on it, and in fact I've only been able to track down one book so far that actually looks at that relationship, and that's a book from the States, and I haven't been able to get a copy of it in Australia as of yet.
Does this subject resonate with you personally?
It does, yeah. I never actually came out to my grandmother before she died, and so for me, in a way, it's quite therapeutic. I'm kind of researching or going through the emotions of what would happen or what could have happened if I'd come out to my grandmother. So far, Mixed Company's done 2 productions, the first play being Waiting for Homo. Dreadful title, dreadful play, but that's okay. It was a benchmark, and that's where we started. And we've moved on from there, and the second production was The Sum of Us by David Stevens, and most people would know that from Russell Crowe and Jack Thompson. And that was a huge artistic success. Railway Street Theatre Company, who's the residential professional theatre company at the Q Theatre in Penrith, a few years ago commissioned Richard Werrett to write a play specifically about Western Sydney and gay people in Western Sydney. I was one of the people that was used for research as part of that process. One of the reasons I've called Mixed Company is because of the fact that I want to involve people of all sexualities. Their sexuality shouldn't necessarily be important, and it's a point that actually was quite controversial in The Sum of Us. Originally the company was set up looking at the participants being gay and lesbian, but then the quality of actors that we were getting auditioning was not particularly high, and a company that's not able to provide a decent quality product is not going to last. Quite happy. I still have involvement in things in the mountains, I have things in the city. I'm kind of in the middle. I'm involved in things around here. I suppose I am quite committed to the West. I see it as a challenge. I could probably, if I wanted to, go into the city, pay higher prices for lots of things, but when it comes to theatre hire and that sort of thing, and be successful, but at the same time I enjoy the challenge of a small theatre like the Q Theatre here, and in an area that isn't necessarily, wouldn't necessarily say it's queer friendly all the time, but I'm challenged by that, and I see it as a challenge, and I want to bring about change within Western Sydney and attitudes and that sort of thing.
dressmaker.
Yeah.
Yes. I know how to make a patterns. I know how to make a dress. And I know how to cooking, make all the different food. I met Rod in Oxford Street, 1979, in 1 o'clock in the morning. I went with a friend of mine, Filipino. We went there for dance, and we've been living together for 23 years. And
So he's quite accepted, and the relationship is accepted within your family.
Family, yes.
Predominantly your family.
Yeah, my family, my brothers, they get on with Rod. Living together, you don't bring your culture together to live. You live your culture, okay? I live my culture, and we are a different culture, but we try to be friendly. We don't want to talk about the culture, but he doesn't mind, as I don't mind either, because culture is nothing. It's more in your heart. You love each other, and do everything together, and be friendly, and listen to each other, not fight. Whatever you want to talk something, I'll listen to him. If he wants to say something, we sit down, we talk, and we don't agree, we come up something different. And this is where we live until now, 23 years.
Listen to the sound of a million voices, the ringing of the changes, people's choices, the revolution's here. The Holocaust averted in the peace drum sound. Listen to the rhythm, the whole world around. The dogs of war slink underground. The revolution's here. As long as the mushroom clouds don't rise above our own suburban skies, we can pretend that the peace stuff flies and that the revolution's here. Meanwhile in the Lebanon another woman dies. In Guatemala desaparecidos is the cry. The people of Tigray sob and sigh. Don't they know the revolution's here? All over the world men kill for a god, and Mandela may be free but his people are not. Tiananmen Square is a blood-stained blot, but the revolution's here. As long as the mushroom clouds don't rise above our own suburban skies, we can pretend that the peace stuff flies and that the revolution's here. And meanwhile here in our own backyard, the children on the streets are cold and scarred. A woman had better be on her guard, but the revolution's here. And God help your soul if your skin's not white, or if you need to walk the streets at night, or if your paycheck stretches tight, but the revolution's here. As long as the mushroom clouds don't rise above our own suburban skies, we can pretend that the peace stuff flies and that the revolution's here. Oh, as long as the mushroom clouds don't rise above our own suburban skies, we can pretend that the peace stuff flies and that the revolution's here.
Hey, you stare at the sun. You're not gonna see anyone. Lost my nerve, I didn't know what to say. A weakness, now you've gone away. Old man sits on a hill, his whole life quiet and very still. He sees his face drawn in the sand at the edge of the